Cool. So, Poonam, why is this 15 years in the making?
15 years. Honestly, when it comes to health and fitness, I feel I was lucky enough that since my childhood, I would say my earliest memories have actually been part of just that kind of health and fitness world. And in the sense of my mum, I remember me and my siblings at the time, we used to run around in the living room while my mum was having a VCR of Rosemary Connolly, if you remember her, like Mr. Motivator, those types of videos, literally on TV. And she used to be trying to do aerobics workouts. And I was probably about 4 or 5 at the time. And obviously, you're just thinking, oh, just jumping around and seeing what you were doing, you know. And for us, it was fun. But at the time, obviously, for my mum, it was trying to get into that zone of fitness. And my dad was always into just being aware of things like wholemeal rice back in the 80s and 90s before it was even a thing, you know, right now. But I would say that although that my parents were into health and fitness, it wasn't the most, I suppose at the time, you know how it was trying to eliminate fats and it's just about cardio, there's no kind of educational purpose there. So although I knew about, I always had that kind of desire to know about the body in that sense, especially with my parents being very spiritual at the same time. It was when I became a teenager, I noticed that, yes, I naturally had quite a lot of puppy fat. So I tried my best to lose all that puppy fat. And what ended up happening is I actually had quite skinny arms and legs at the time, and I was about 13, 14 years old, but I looked like I was pregnant. Like I had a
Yeah.
massive swelling. And it was only when my mom was thinking, like, why have you got a big swelling there? Like, what's happened? So I had no idea because I was a tomboy. So I just wore like baggy clothes. And for me, I just thought that was a normal part of your teenage girl growing up. And my mum actually suggested that we go and see the GP. And then my GP was saying, why didn't you come sooner? You know, you've got a huge swelling. And what I didn't realize is I had an ovarian cyst, the size of a baby growing in me. So I ended up having to have an operation. It was like an 8-hour operation, actually. And where my navel area is, I've actually got a 14-inch scar from the removal. And the moment it came out, it was amazing because, again, I didn't realize I even had this growth in the first place. And from, I think it was back in August 2004 and until December 2004, that's when the process of just getting the appointments in the hospital, and in December, that's when it was removed. And I felt like amazing after, because I was able to wear those typical teenage tight girl clothes and feel a lot more confident. And I just thought, oh, it's removed now, I'll be able to just kind of eat what I want. And that's when the whole pivot happened, where I knew I had to do something in terms of trying to maintain weight down, but I was very uneducated in that, in terms of, you know, when you just don't know what the right macros are to eat at the time. And this is going back in 2005 now, and you think, you know, you're still growing up as a teenager at the same time. So what do you do? And I kind of knew that for uni at this point, you then start thinking about A levels and university and what course to choose. And I was genuinely going to do sports and exercise science at uni. And my parents were actually very supportive. And what ended up happening was I had a random auntie who was, again, she didn't say it in a bad way, but she just said, you know, you're much more guaranteed a job if you go down that kind of sciencey route. And I ended up doing that. I ended up not following my gut feeling of knowing I should have done something in that nutritional sector. And luckily, I mean, I did end up having the scientific job and blah, blah, blah. But that was more to do with why the journey took so long. And then once I had that kind of job in London, I just thought there was something still keeping me wanting to know a lot more about the nutrition side, because that was something I had as almost a hobby to learn about. Um, so I ended up actually just deciding to, after 2 years, I just thought I'm going to just stop working and just travel the world, get some world experience and see where that takes me. And what ended up happening was I ended up ballooning up and putting on a lot of weight because I had no structure in place. I was traveling the world, which is great, but I just ended up just eating and not exercising. And I actually ended up volunteering in a few countries. So Fiji, for example, they actually want the women to stay at home as typical in the village I was at, and the men had to do all the work at the time in this country I was volunteering in. So I ended up eating cassava all day, and if you just imagine carbs, 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 I ended up ballooning up to 80 kilograms. It was horrendous, really. So by the time I came back to the UK, it was January 2015. That's when I thought, oh my gosh, like this is really bad. I need to now lose this weight. So I invested in personal trainers, and I started to just try to find my own journey. And I actually enrolled in a nutrition course because, again, that's something I really wanted to do. And I was getting there, but something wasn't quite right. I still knew that I felt like I was living in some kind of shell suit, of a fat shell suit that wasn't me. I just needed to kind of get rid of that. And it was just, I actually came across you guys in 2017 when you first kind of launched, and my gut feeling was like, okay, something's telling me to go for it. But then I was a bit intimidated at the time because I thought it's all about the bodybuilders, and I'm not a bodybuilder. Why am I going to go in a bodybuilding situation? So although that I saw you guys, I didn't actually go for the plunge when you guys launched in 2017. And then I ended up having another personal trainer. So I ended up having about 3 different personal trainers in that time. And although it was good, because again, I always think everything does happen for that reason, there was part of me that just had a switch thinking, right, I know the reason I didn't go for RNT at the time was I thought from a spectrum, if you imagine 0 is where people are, let's say, obese, and 10 is when you get RNT, fitness, amazing bodybuilding type thing. Even if I get to a 5, even if I get to that 5, that would be an achievement on my own. And then I signed up, and then here I am. So yeah, that was kind of a 15-year kind of journey, hopefully wrapped up in 5-10 minutes there.
Can you elaborate on the feeling of being in a shell? You described it as being in a shell and you need to get out, or something along those lines. I mean, I call it, shedding the skin.
Yeah.
What can you describe that feeling, and why you didn't quite feel like you were in the right sort of being, and why something still needed to change? What was going on there?
Yeah, I think in that sense, a lot of it at the time did come down to the external is that ego-driven process of, why is that girl able to wear that kind of those clothes? I want to be able to wear those clothes, but when I try on those similar style outfits, I just don't look as if how I imagine I want to look. And a lot of it then came down to just comparing myself to other people. And I think that's when the non-self-belief came into it, because part of me has always been positive, like, whatever you can do, just put your mind to it. And then the other part of me was thinking, well, if I believe this, why is it not happening? And I think it was that whole devil and angel kind of concept. And then part of me, when I did join RNT, was literally being able to realize, why am I comparing myself to everyone else when there is no time constraint? Because there was that just letting go of the ego part and just realizing I can actually do it if I put my mind to it. And once that mind shift came into place, again, part of RNT's journey, that's when I was able to shed the skin, as you've said it as well. So that all came down to actually finding my true identity and not comparing myself to someone else's identity.
How did you feel in that sense of seeking external gratification? Because one thing I notice in a lot of people is they go on a journey where they're externally driven, when really it has to become internally driven, else it won't be sustainable and it won't be for life. But it's very difficult to pull yourself out of that external seeking. Can you describe like
Absolutely.
how that process happened? Because I think it can help a lot of people who no matter where they are, they still feel, oh, I'm not looking like that person, or I'm not looking like that person, or I'm doing this because I can do that, or I'm doing this for that person. Talk us through that process.
So I would say there's a definite key element here. When I did sign up to RNT, there's these options, and the option I went for was a total transformation. Part of me, again, I always know my gut feeling. I knew for me to succeed, I needed to transform completely in that kind of 12-month. And at the time, I know there were different options, and I wanted to go for the maximum 12-month total transformation of my mind shift. And what I would say is, again, that angel and devil was still there. Even though I knew I was committing to RNT and signing up, part of me was thinking, am I even going to get through this in the first place? Because if I've had PTs in the past and I haven't succeeded, what's going to be different this time? If I've had kind of meal plans from other places and I haven't committed to it, why is this going to be different this time? And again, knowing that I was signed up for the longest option, which was a 12-month at the time, I just thought, I'm going to go all in and all out. And interestingly, even though I say that, it still took me the first 3 months of actually dedicating to RNT before I even had that mind shift. So timescale wise, I'm really grateful that I actually signed up. It was actually in June that I wanted to sign up, and then you guys got full, and I thought that was a real burden in my heart, because I was thinking, no, now I desperately want to join. And then luckily I was put into the October cohort, and then I thought, great, I'm in it now, I'm all in, and nothing's going to stop me. And again, this is where that angel and devil play that part, because that's where I wanted to feel. And then I started hearing the excuses of, Diwali's coming up, Christmas is coming up, I'm going to go on my honeymoon, and I've got the excuse to pig out when I'm on my honeymoon. And I was thinking, why am I making these excuses? Because although I've got a great coach that's keeping me accountable, at the end of the day, like, I need to also do it for myself. And then as part of the RNT family group, I saw other people in the same cohort actually succeeding, and I felt I was stuck. And part of me was thinking, I'm getting annoyed at them. But then I thought, why am I getting annoyed at them? Like, they're actually doing what they need to do. They start at the same time. If anything, it's me. It has to come down to what I need to do. I need to change my mind shift here. And by the time it was January, as cliche as it sounds, it was that whole, okay, it's a brand new year, it's 2020, it's going to be my year. And actually, that's when the mind shift occurred. And of course, a couple of months later, end of March, we went into lockdown. And I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to let anything this time round stop me, because I've finally got into that mind shift in January. It's now been 2 months, I'm committed. And I'm either going to now let something such as lockdown stop me, or just keep giving it my all. And again, as you all know, lockdown, you can either, make sure it has that introspective view, which definitely helps, or it can, other people which are not part of RNT can just end up slacking. And the great thing about what you guys did in that lockdown was the most amazing thing in terms of how you were able to transform lives, even just being at home. That was huge.
Amazing. I think the thing you said around committing to 12 months, kind of feeling yourself in, and then being okay, even though you had a slow start at the beginning, being okay with it, and turning that around, because everyone's got their own sort of path and their ability to kind of get going. But had you said, let's say for example, you'd only committed to 3 months, which we don't have as an option, but if we did, that's the most typical thing. Potentially when you got to January, it would have been like, this isn't for me, or this isn't the right thing for me. But you gave yourself that room to grow into, and you get, and you almost needed that quote unquote false start, which, there's no such thing as a false start. But if you want to put it into this sort of context, to make you internalize it all and bring it within. And then when you started in January, what was fueling you then, as opposed to, because I'm assuming a lot of the things you said around external came from some of the teenage stuff you mentioned with regards to, why are other people looking like this, or why am I, what am I doing here? So how are you sort of navigating yourself in that perspective?
Yeah, I think I really thought about time as a perception. I think a lot of people out there just want to have a race. And again, it's that ego-driven part where they want to succeed before someone else. And for me, I just thought, well, it's time is infinite or finite. Everyone's has the same amount of minutes and hours in the day, and it's how you use it. And I think some people really rush to get everything done without actually having that mind shift. Yes, they can change their body, but actually you do need to dedicate that time into actually realizing where you really want to see yourself in a few years' time. You don't just want to get to that first checkpoint and then just for the sake of the body aesthetics and then go backwards in time. So for me, I just knew that I'd rather be that tortoise versus the hare in the race, and that was going to serve me. I think, again, in terms of in the past, I had tried the whole 30-day situation of, seeing where that was taking me. And yes, I did lose some weight, but then I was really fast able to put that weight back on when it came to old different plans, which I had tried a few years earlier. So then this is completely different. I'd never committed myself to a 12-month situation. And actually, it must have been one of an earlier podcast before I'd even joined RNT, where I'm sure it was you, Akash, that said, you need to just almost be the CEO of your own life. And, you dedicate yourself into, let's say, a job or career, and you don't think, oh, I'm going to do this job in 30 days and that's it, I'm going to move and quit my job and do something else. Like, you're committed to having, let's say, a job or career, and it's taking that ownership of your own life as well. And why do people put a time scale on that? It's kind of, whether it's your personal life, which it is, it's just an ongoing thing until you kind of die, really, isn't it? So why not commit?
I mean, ownership is I think ownership and initiative of your own life can be one of the most scary things if you've not done it for a long time. And ownership of your health and fitness, especially, requires you to want to become educated, requires you to learn, to be willing to learn, to keep an open-minded growth mindset. And that can be very difficult if you're so used to an industry which is just giving you plans, and taking all the thinking out for you, and you don't actually have any ownership. Did you find, like, how did you find stepping into the realm of having more ownership and initiative of your own journey, so that you seek to be educated rather than just mindlessly following something?
Yeah, so for me, I feel quite lucky that I've always had that kind of personality where I've wanted to have a growth mindset. I've always wanted to have that ownership, but I didn't have the tools to know where and who to follow to actually teach and educate me. Because in life, I think there's always that importance of knowing you have that student mentality and you're always willing to learn. And for me, when it came down to, let's say, a few years ago, on social media, for example, Instagram, I know people think, it can be a bad thing, social media. And at the time, I was following so many different things, plus random celebrities. And this year, I literally stripped everything back. What I realized is I was following too many unnecessary things. So actually, as part of my Instagram, it's such an amazing tool now that I actually am an advocate for social media, because actually you can use it to the best of your ability. I've got rid of any kind of celebrities and crap that I don't really need to listen to or watch or compare myself to at all. Again, what I then have realized is, on social media, yes, there's many different types of fitness and health education. And of course, what you then realize is every single person's body is truly different in terms of reacting, whether it's legumes, then that's a good health food, but someone else might react very differently to it. So you have to figure out what works for your own body. And having that 12-month transformation allowed me to have that time to realize, what works, what doesn't work. And then you realize it all comes down to your individual self at that point as well.
How did you find the trial and error process? Like, from what you said there, you took ownership of, okay, this is not working, this is working, I'm going to keep this, scrap that. Give us examples of some things that didn't work at all, and some things which have worked really well for you that you see as a sustainable lifestyle solution.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I really enjoyed, just even signing up to you guys in the first place, which helped, was when you asked what kind of meals the individual likes to eat. That was already a bonus, because I had no idea what it was going to be like at first. So I absolutely love things like yogurt and porridge in the morning. And as part of my dinner, I thought I had to be healthy and include a lot of things like kidney beans, for example, just for the sake of it being whole meal, which it is good for you, which everyone kind of knows. But what I then realized was it did make me look, although I didn't experience any bad bloating in terms of physically feeling any cramps or anything, I actually looked like I was slightly bloated. So I was able to kind of eliminate that out and add something such as corn pieces, which made me look, less bloated in that way. So it's just knowing that yes, you might think you're on the right path in certain foods, but actually you may respond differently to someone else. So I was able to eliminate certain legumes like that out.
And have you continued that process? Any other examples you can give for like things that don't work? Because traditionally, legumes, kidney beans, they're considered, you know, extremely healthy. But for some
Yeah.
people, it doesn't go that well. It's typically something like bloating, gastric distress, or that sort of stuff. Like, what other things have you noticed?
Another example was before I signed up, I thought I was being completely healthy in the sense of, for my porridge, I used to add, honestly, like chia seeds, linseeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, without weighing any of this. It was just literally just like putting everything in a bowl, thinking I'm the healthiest person on earth. And of course, everyone knows in terms of macros, yes, you need your fats, proteins, and carbs. And again, you have so many different diets out there that's, you know, say eat high fats, low carbs, eat high carbs, low fats, and you just don't really know what you're doing. So what I was able to do is understand that, yes, we know things like seeds and chia seeds are all good for you, but in what portion is right for your individual body. And I think that was part of the learning and the educational piece that came into it, knowing what actually is going to fuel my body for my height, ratio, weight, whatever it is. And again, that came as part of that trial and error there.
Have you found yourself developing a good BS meter now? Like when you see things out there, can you automatically tell, this is a load of crap, or and like how have you found that? Because I think that's one of the hardest things for anyone like more general population who isn't in the industry, is like to notice what's actually good information and what's
Yeah,
just total crap.
exactly. I think what it is there's plenty of people that know foods which are healthy versus unhealthy. I know there's no such thing as bad food in that sense. It's all
Yeah,
about
yeah,
portion control at that point.
yeah,
But you almost need to get through that kind of cycle before you realize that. But let's say we are typically talking about those kind of healthy foods. I think people need to understand what ratio and portions suit their individual body. But one thing I would say is, even though I feel like I'm aware of it, I still need accountability from Ed in terms of coaching, and because it's very easy to think that you're aware, and that's where the consolidation investment phrase comes into it, where I'm still at that point where I don't want to second guess without just checking. And I think that's the great thing of having that accountability with Ed, and just knowing
yeah,
that I can have that kind of angel sitting on my shoulder to ask whenever I
yeah, yeah.
need.
So it's almost like you've taken ownership of your education, but you like the idea of a sign off
Yes.
to kind of keep you pushing along.
Yeah, it's that reassurance knowing you are in the right path, because sometimes you can go in, and I know again it depends on who it is that person at what phase they're at. But for me, it's nice knowing that there's someone I can just check in with. And again, it's just that reassurance purpose. Otherwise you could end up going into a downward spiral without realizing. So
Mm,
having that community to always just check, it's great.
awesome. Um, so you're in the investment phase now, and for someone who's lost nearly 30 kilos, right, which in itself is a remarkable feat. So congratulations on that. But I think what's more remarkable is the fact that you consolidated really well, and now you're investing in amplifying all the benefits that you've received into your life. And we'll come on to how you've used the physical as the vehicle in due course. But I want to discuss like how you find the identity shift of
Yeah.
now this is your body for life, and now you can improve on it, you can build on it, and how you find the identity of someone who used to be 30 kilos heavier. That's a very
Yeah.
difficult thing to get your head around sometimes, and there's a rewiring that needs to happen with your behavior, mindset, and identity. Talk us through
Yes.
this process, because you're someone that, when I give examples of people that, you lose 30 kilos but you're still thinking like 30 kilos ago. How have
Yes.
you found that process?
So I think going backwards in time, when I initially started, as I mentioned, there was that ego thing going on about comparing myself to others,
Yeah,
and then it was a matter of letting that ego go as part of the process phase. And then I believe during that kind of grind phase, I then realized that actually after the grind, I needed that ego to push past it, to show the ego that actually, in order to have the improvement and achieve your goals, it's almost necessary to have the stubbornness of ego to let it go in order to achieve that liberation. And I think when it comes down to changing the mind shift, it was all about knowing that there's almost two parts of you. You've got your adult version of yourself, and then you've got this kind of childlike version of yourself, which I know some people refer to as like the monkey mind. And again, that little child always comes into it thinking, you know, just grab that piece of chocolate, get that extra piece of chocolate. And you need to almost tell that inner child of yours just to pause and breathe. And I think just having that breath work, literally a few pauses, does make you go back into the new identity shift. And it makes you realize actually you're no longer the old version of yourself.
Can you describe the ego thing again? That was really interesting. You said you need ego to push past, to let go of the old identity. Is that right?
Yeah,
Can you explain that a bit better?
Yeah, so when it comes down to people know that ego is something, let's say, connotates as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But when we are living in this life, you know, why are we born with an ego? Like, what is the purpose of it? Why have an ego if it's not a good thing in the first point? But what I realized, again, only through this phase, is actually the ego is something which you can associate with being, you know, that stubborn-minded version of yourself. But for you to realize you need to let go of that, you need to have that ego in the first place, because if you never had it, then you don't realize what you're having to let go. Once you've let it go, that's when you feel free and you have that renunciation of the new identity, because you can look back at what you've come from and realize what you've achieved in terms of letting that ego actually finally go.
At what point did you feel like you let go of it?
I would say having the consolidation phase now, because that point, that's when you've actually shifted from that Poonam 1.0 to now Poonam 2.0, and now realizing what can Poonam 3.0 actually achieve.
Interesting. Have you found, like, in your sort of day to day, you're finding that ego trying to come back, like the old self knocking on its door again?
There are times when, again, this is more of a, for example, a trigger is something such as chocolate.
Yeah.
If I feel like there's chocolate around, I want to be in an area where I have chocolate in the house and it doesn't bother me. So I know people say, you know, avoid bringing it in the house in the first place. Why would you want to trigger it? But I want to get my mind to a point where it's that strong, where it's not going to affect me at all. But there are genuinely times, there are times when I can see it coming back, and that's when I need to use that kind of pause, breathe effect, and then try and push past it.
So you use a lot of breath work. Is there anything specific you're doing there, or is it just literally just pausing?
There were two types. There was one time I was almost overthinking it, so I was just like, okay, stop, breathe, 5 breaths in, 5 breaths out. And I was trying to use some kind of the 5 senses. When you have you look around at 5 things around you at that certain point in time, you touch 4 things around you and just kind of identify where you are and what's triggering you in terms of your environment. 3 things that you can maybe smell in the area, 2 things that you can see. And I was thinking, okay, this is working.
It's a lot to do.
It's going to take a lot of energy and time each single time I have, you know, any kind of trigger. So now, going back to that kind of monkey mind, it was literally just like, shut up, because I was almost being too kind of myself. But I was like, oh, inner child, you know, nurture it, tell it to stop. And it was just overthinking. And I just thought, you know what, if I just say, just stop, get over it. Like, there's much more going on in life as well. Like, there's a chocolate bar is not going to rule your life. Just stop. And then I was able to just stop. So it depends on how I'm feeling on the day. But there is something called it was a funny thing in terms of monkey mind. You can call it P.A.B.L.O, P.A.B.L.O, and it's literally P for pause, A for being aware of where you are, B for the breath work, L for just, you know, letting it go, and O just observing. So I think that's just another thing. But hopefully in time, just like driving a car, you know, when you start thinking about it too much, it becomes an issue where you put your foot on the brake and your hand on the steering wheel, but then it just becomes second nature.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out, by the time I'm into that heavy investment phase, it will just become second nature.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm in that process of changing from that consolidation investment phase.
Well, what you're going through at the moment is, it's a really good period, but it's also that risky period, because you're in that, you're still, you're doing all the senses, the P.A.B.L.Os and all these things, but you want to get to the point where, like you said, it's automatic, and that is when you completely step into that new identity, or whereby you're in that shifting now, but it's in the identity where you don't even associate the old self in there. But what you're doing there is exactly right. You know, when I talk about dealing with crutches and dealing with stressors, one of the best things you can do is just awareness. You know, if you have a certain crutch you use to deal with stresses, the best way to overcome it is having awareness around it and reporting on that awareness, and then building new associations in that. So
that's from you again, because the two things that really helped in my journey so far was your RNT book, because you almost prepped us in the mind, knowing what to expect. Because again, as part of getting to that checkpoint, just knowing what comes after, your book, you really explain it so well. And of course, just your podcast that you explained it in terms of what happened to you in 2014. I could listen to that multiple times. And actually, it was in January of this year that I really genuinely started doing the whole gratitude journaling part of it as well. And again, just writing down my thoughts. As I mentioned to you in an email, I had RNT written in half of my, well, no, literally 3 bullet points I write down every day, and RNT is always part of one of my bullet points anyway. So it's interesting how it all kind of came together, because I actually thought of journaling a couple of years ago, and I stopped. And looking back on one of my old journals, it's so funny that one of my bullet points was, I achieved 1,000 steps today, just 1,000. And it was only from you guys that, you know, that consistency, just keep going, and then it just eventually becomes that habit, and it does change you.
Yeah. One of the things you spoke about, one of the things you sent me in an email was a grind log you wrote. It was almost like a little journal that you created just for that period, which I'm assuming was where you were realizing a lot of these things and having a lot of introspection of what was going on. Do you want to give some insights into some of this grind log? And specifically, there was a point where you wrote around, you felt you were becoming the butterfly. You know, you were really transforming, and you were feeling something was about, you were making realizations that you wanted to push forward on in future phases. Talk us through some of these experiences and what you learned.
And I'm so glad you brought up the butterfly, because I'm actually wearing my butterfly studs that I wore in the photo shoot, but I'll come to that as well. So in terms of that, the reason I wanted to create the log was I knew that when I joined RNT, I could see people on the forum that were long-term members. And I think one of the things going back was I didn't realize how much effort they had put in to get to the grind. And at the time you think, oh, what is this grind? I'm going to get onto it. And because my first 3 months took a lot of, you know, hardship in terms of my mind, thinking, how am I ever going to reach to this grind point in the first place? And I thought, you almost feel like you want to be part of the tribe and get to the grind, so you can say to the rest of the group that I'm part of the grind now, and you kind of get this kind of different acceptance from the group because you've got to that point. So I knew I definitely needed to get to the grind, because you don't want to be that person that signs up to something and just quits, you know, on the first hurdle. So when I was approaching the grind, for me it was a big deal, because I thought, I'm actually finally going to get to this grind point that so many people have had this kind of spiritual awakening, and what's it going to be like for me? And what's so interesting is actually, even prior to the grind, that whole thought process is what is actually creating the foundation of the grind to begin with anyway. And before even attempting to get onto the grind, it was all about that visualization. What's it going to be like on the grind? How am I going to react? How am I going to feel? And then I thought, you know what, instead of just visualizing it, let's just write down these thoughts as well. And in terms of once I started the grind, you actually do feel this kind of weight, not even physical weight, even though it is, but you do have this kind of light feeling that you physically feel like you're on a different zone. What I mean by that is, for those 15 years, I'm so grateful that I did have these trial and error situations occur. And although it didn't get me to my achieved goal, in those 15 years, if I had achieved it too early on, I could have easily risked not learning about myself. And that's where this was a very different situation, where those kind of breadcrumbs that had been laid down in the last 15 years, I was able to collate all those jigsaw pieces, as I mentioned. I was able to pick up all these jigsaw pieces of the nutrition education, the 30-day-old plans that I tried and errored, going to the gym, trying the different PTs, and it all kind of came together as part of the grind in that kind of zone where I was able to really understand my full potential, where I could actually push myself to a point that I had never pushed myself before in my life. And it clarifies your mind as well. You kind of want to know where you want to be in a few years' time. It makes you think about your mind, body, and soul. It makes you think about accountability for yourself. It makes you think about so much more aspects. And again, it's so interesting. It wasn't even about the physical at that point. And that's when you become that kind of metamorphosis into that butterfly situation.
Love it. I think that's that's definitely the spiritual introspective moments you get when energy is restricted, time is pressed, and you have to become an essentialist. But there's one thing to have these realizations, and there's another thing to implement them and integrate it into your life going forwards. Like, what's been the integration process for you in all these realizations you've had to actually building into your new identity? How have you managed to integrate?
I think a couple of things. Although I know I did have, let's say, that photo shoot, I think I'd never actually intended to ever have a photo shoot to begin with, because I didn't have any event that the photo shoot was for. It wasn't for a wedding. It wasn't for a big kind of birthday or anything. But I wanted to have that accountability, and even stripping away things like the photo shoot, having that accountability to yourself, as well as your coach, makes you want to push now, because you just want to keep becoming the best version of yourself. It makes you realize that each individual has so much potential, and you just want them to have that experience, because you don't want to, when you see other people just literally just not wasting time just sitting on the couch watching endless TV, you just think there's so much more you can do in your life, and you just want to inspire others in that sense. It's interestingly, you think, every 5 seconds your mind can make a choice and a decision, and if you imagine every 5 seconds you can change your life in so many ways. And you can just shape your own reality, and what you realize is you have the power to shape your own reality.
So what are you doing to remind yourself all these things on a day-to-day basis? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at here? It's like, it's why I want to make sure that that we really push for everyone is that anytime you have introspection, there needs to be integration after.
Yes.
So going forwards, how are you continuing to amplify these vehicle effects in your life?
Yeah, I would say what worked well for me in the process phase is what I'm continuing. So it is to do with the consistency. So of course, making sure that whatever you're thinking is put into action in reality.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to, from the point of visualization to actually writing it down, by writing it down, it's manifesting what can actually become reality, and then actually going through, and let's say I do 5 minutes of yoga a day. It's just committing to it. So making that commitment to yourself that you are going to do it no matter what comes in your way. And each little consistency will become that structure of your day. And then, of course, that will go to the week, the month, the year. And then that's just one thing. It's just keeping everything consistent.
Have you found yourself shifting from goalposts to just inner growth?
Yeah. I think when it comes down to it, there's two things where in the past I used to say, yeah, I'm going to reach my goal. But once you've reached a goal, you've kind of ended the game. Let's say in football, you've got your goal, you've won. But then let's say football is going to continue going on and on and on. It's like a endless, although the match is finished, you're still going to watch the next match and the next match and the next match, and it becomes more of a mission. So it's more of a life mission now rather than a goal.
Just to get better and better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was speaking to Ed, he said to me, the process for Poonam, it's amplified everything in her life. In that is she's taken it in different areas of her life, and she's really used the physical as a vehicle. So tell me and tell the listeners, how's the physical been the vehicle for you?
I think it was it's very interesting that I don't want to sound cliche and too yoga-ish like, but it's that mind, body, and soul that comes into it. It does elevate your mind to actually want to keep striving to be better. And I feel like I'm able to see things quite differently now. I can see things from other people's point of view and try to understand, their deeper meaning. So when it comes to any kind of topic, rather than just thinking, oh, I'm right and they're wrong, just trying to understand things a lot better from a different perception, and just trying to really see things from almost like a bird's eye view, as the whole introspect, not introspect, it's just trying to see things differently.
Thinking differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was that?
Evolving the mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the shift from goals to growth is one of the biggest things you can do for sustainability of a lifestyle solution and for continuous transformation. Because when you take away always thinking, oh, I've got to achieve another goal, you take the pressure off, but secondly, you make it more about just general improvement and just incremental gains each week, whereby your goal is literally just adding 1% in some area. And when you do that over the course of a year, you'll be surprised just how far you can come. But it just takes that ability. It's taking away, like almost taking any goal off a pedestal, and instead just focusing on internal growth on a week to week, day by day, week to week, month by month basis.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what is the Poonam 3.0 then? What does she look like? What does she sound like? What is the? I'm not saying goal, but you said at the beginning that, and you said to me, I can't wait to see what Poonam 3.0 is like. What is what is the strive towards?
I'd love to inspire others, because I think I just want to let other people know that they all have that kind of opportunity within them. And the words I am, those two particular words, it's so powerful, and not from an ego point of view, but when you say I am and dot dot dot, what word would you use to describe yourself? And it'll be interesting to know what people say initially, and what people would say, after finding out more about themselves. And I believe the way they would do that is genuinely from things such as nutrition to begin with, and then having that element of knowing what they eat, how it affects them, because of course all the nutrients that they consume, and then it just has that domino effect. So inspiring others is something I'd love to do, and again, just being the best version of myself as well.
This podcast is going to go out ahead of our next cohort in January. What advice would you want to give to someone who is about to start their journey on January the 1st, especially speaking from your own experiences that you had in the first couple of months?
Absolutely. I think I would say, if you're that one person that feels like this is not the journey for them, it's what am I doing here? Why is someone else moving so fast? They've already lost 5 kilograms and I've only lost 0.5 kilograms. Like, don't compare yourself to anyone. It's your own journey. There is no end cut-off point. So just keep going. Believe in yourself. You have the support there, whether it's your coach, whether it's the RNT family, even if it's a private email that you send to another RNT family member, just keep going, trust the process, trust the plan. And whether it takes you 3 months, just like I did, to even get your head around it, it's okay, because the results are much more than what you realize and what you anticipate. It's going to serve you in a life way, not just in the time of the plan that you have.
And on a similar note, what advice would you give to someone who has hit a checkpoint and is now moving into consolidation, investment, and now looking towards progressing forwards and striving towards bigger and better things?
Yeah, I think I would say to them, of course, if you've reached that checkpoint, congratulations, you've got there, you've done it. And don't worry if things are not perfect. That's the whole point, where we still have that support. In life, you're meant to have ups and downs, so you don't expect perfection each time. Write down your thoughts, because when you write things down, you're able to reflect so much more deeper than you realize. And just remember to pause and breathe.
Pause and breathe. Yeah. Simple tips go a long way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I almost feel like I need to get, so I don't have any tattoos, but I feel like actually just drawing down a little pause button sign, just so I can have that as a constant reminder.
Yeah. You said you read the Gita recently, didn't you?
Yeah, it was again really interesting that luckily, well, my parents were based in Leicester and I live in London. And December 2019, Dad just handed it over to me. So I wasn't planning, part of me knew I wanted to read it. And actually, what worked out weirdly well enough was, because of lockdown, I decided just to read it in that time. So it came in as a parallel world at the same time as RNT plus the Gita at the same time. And I think that was meant to be honest, because I was able to have the shift of my mind and my body at the same time together. And I ended up reading just 12 separate books this year. And that may not sound a lot to someone else, but for me, 12 books was, including yours, Akash, as well.
Oh, thank you.
That was like an achievement for me. So it ended up just becoming a new domino effect altogether.
Yeah, yeah. What was the best book you read this year? Not a trick question, of course, but
No, the Gita was definitely a huge one, because I was able to understand. But your book was great. I ended up reading about nutrition books. I ended up reading a book about Einstein's theory on time, which was,
oh wow, yeah,
never even thought. But that was a fictional one actually. And just more about feng shui and what was the other one? There was some books about um it was about leadership as well, being vulnerable in the workplace. So again, it all kind of tied in together, because again, there was a book about vulnerability, and that was a word that I would never have associated with myself, thinking, why should you be vulnerable? Doesn't that mean that you're just kind of weak-minded? But actually, asking for help when necessary, that's what's going to help you long term. So why not ask for help? Don't be shy, and there are people there to help you and guide you.
When have you feel like you're being vulnerable this year?
So interestingly, the book was actually about cooperation in terms of the work and the business life, and in terms of the work environment. And it was more to do with actually being open with other colleagues, because some people, may be shy and not ask a particular question. And then you think, well, everyone else is probably thinking that same question, why not just ask it? And then actually that's what's going to help with that teamwork, and that's what's going to help push progress forward.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, some good books there, and it sounds like you're kind of expanding your mind
Yeah.
at the same time. Have you got any parting words for the listeners?
I would say, in terms of on your own journey, you're on your own journey. Whatever's happened in the past, even if you think things haven't worked, it would have served you in some way. And just always have that open mind, that when there are suggestions, listen to it. You don't always have to follow it, and trial and error is fine, and just keep going.
Yeah, the trial and error thing is so big. I think it's something I want more and more people to embrace as a positive, and it's not wasting time. Trial and error isn't wasting time. It's actually helping you because you're educating yourself through that process of trial and error. And
Yes.
if you go into everything mindlessly and you never have to think about if something's going to work or not, you don't really educate yourself. All you're really doing is just following something.
Yes.
So keeping that trial and error at all times is probably one of the best growth tools you can have for yourself. So
That,
completely agree with it. And yeah, the more, especially now for the phase you're in, you'll find even more a trial and error component comes into it, because now it's like, okay, how do I just make this a way of life? And
yes.
you've got to try and error on your nutrition, your training, your lifestyle, your mindset, your ability to deal with stress, your environment around you, the people around you. And it's like, okay, well, I might have to try and error with some of these things in order to find what actually works for me long term, that I don't need to think about, that doesn't need to be a conscious decision, and that can just become automatic with my life and become a way of life. And continuing to keep that trial and error, which I think is one of the cornerstones of a growth mindset, is going to only amplify everything you do going forwards.
Yeah, I think too many people sweat the small stuff. So, for example, when people expect to lose weight, they think it should just be linear.
Yeah.
Again, that it's part of life, whether it's anything, it's always going to be that kind of mini roller coaster. When people have that heartbeat, it's not just a flat line, is it? It's always going to be up and down. And people just need to realize that is part of that trial and error, going up and down as well. And too many people get concerned on the small things that aren't really a big deal. So just kind of trusting the process, trusting you guys. You guys are amazing in terms of RNT as a family team, and just in terms of the way you've created the structure, the 3 S's, and all of it's just, now I can't live without it. If anything, I can see how it's already affected my own family.
Brilliant.
For me, it's just I'm literally going on about steps all the time, and it's something that I can see my family doing. I know my sister's signing up for, and hopefully she'll be in the January cohort as well. So yeah, that should be good.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing your story, Poonam. It's been amazing. And looking forward to seeing what Poonam 3.0 transforms into.
Thank you so much.